tree. One of the birds, the individual atomic soul, is eating the fruit of the tree, and the other bird, Krishna, is simply watching his friend. Of these two birds, although they are the same in quality, one is captivated by the fruits of matured tree, while the other is simply witnessing the activities of his friend. Krishna is the witnessing bird, and Arjuna is the eating bird. Although they are friends, one is still the master, and the other is the servant. Forgetfulness of this relationship by the atomic soul is the cause of one's changing his position from one tree to another, and from one body to another. The jiva soul is struggling very hard on the tree of mature body, but as soon as he agrees to accept the other bird as a supreme spiritual master, as Arjuna agrees to do by voluntarily surrendering unto Krishna for instruction, the subordinate bird immediately becomes free from all lamentation. Both the Mukunda Upanishad 3.1.2 and Shvetavtara Upanishad 4.7 confirm this. Samena vriksha purusho namanguno anasya sochati muhu amana tatam yadam pashyantya anyam isham asyam hinanam iti vita shokha. Although the two birds are in the same tree, the eating bird is fully engrossed with anxiety and moroseness as the enjoyer of the fruits of the tree. But in some way or other, he turns his face to his friend, the Lord, and he knows his glories. At once, the suffering bird becomes free from all anxieties. Arjuna has now turned his face towards his eternal friend Krishna and is understanding the Bhagavad Gita from him. And thus, hearing from Krishna, he can understand the supreme glories of the Lord and be free from lamentation. Arjuna is advised herein by the Lord not to lament for the bodily change of his old grandfather and his teacher. He should rather be happy to kill their bodies in righteous fight so that they may be cleansed at once of all reactions from various bodily activities. One who lays down his life on the sacrificial altar or in proper battlefield is at once cleansed of bodily reactions and promoted to a higher status of life. So there was no cause for Arjuna's lamentation. Hare Krishna. So, as I said, this is a very famous verse which is quoted by Prabhupada and many other devotees, the Acharyas in the Parampara, because this is one of the key verses of Bhagavad Gita, which focuses on the temporary nature of the material body and how there is something which is beyond temporary body. Just as the verse says how we put on new garments like new clothes or new jewels, new glasses or any other ornaments or garments, and as we get new ones, we are ready to give up the old ones. Just as like when we first get something new, like a t-shirt or a jacket, we wear it so much and then over time it becomes old and it gets holes in them. It gets like cuts, and then you start searching for a new one. And then, even though you might be so attached to it early, when you first get it, you're ready to give it up in time because it's temporary. Everything in the mature world has its time. So Krishna says, "Time I am the destroyer of everything. So by time Krishna gradually destroys the material body, and he does it for our own benefit, because he wants to tell us that this world is not for us to get comfortable, and we have to rise beyond something that's temporary. So Prabhupada based his whole mood of preaching and the philosophy of Krishna consciousness based on this verse. There's a very old record of Prabhupada, very early days around of International Society for Krishna Consciousness, where in the record he says how we are a spirit soul. We are not this temporary body, but we are a spirit soul. We are part and parcel of Krishna. And Prabhupada didn't just say it with his tongue, he really meant it. Prabhupada also says in one of his lectures how we shouldn't just say that we are not this body, but we should deeply realize that we are something beyond this temporary body. And many times we could even experience this, how there are so many accounts of like near-death experiences where people see, I had this experience and I'm not this body. There's something beyond, like, I was floating in air, like around, like circling like this light bulb or something. So there's accounts of that. There's something beyond this temporary body which has its own limitations. It grows old and becomes useless, just as most of the things, all the things in this material world. So, Prabhupada, he focused on this very simple aspect of Krishna consciousness, because even though it's very simple to hear, and you could even use your intelligence to understand how I'm not this body, but the soul. But if you really deeply introspect on the spiritual plane, it's very difficult to live and act on this platform of I'm not this body, but a spirit soul, which is eternally blissful, full of joy, full of intelligence. And in that relation to the one who made the spirit soul, which is Krishna, because Prabhupada says the spirit soul is part and parcel of Krishna. Many times we go on book distribution, there's one very famous picture in Bhagavad Gita, which so many people just pull out because it's very simple, but it has a very deep meaning of how we are not this body. It's like this picture of there's a spirit soul passing through different bodies, and when you meet people on the streets, it's like one of the first things you tell them, oh, you're not this body, you're just passing through. You're a spirit soul having a human experience. So, and it really catches people off guard so many times, because people are not so conditioned to hearing something that's beyond the material body, because they're like, oh, so I'm not this, and this is not mine, and this family doesn't belong to me, and this car is not mine, this house is not mine, I don't belong to this nation, I don't belong to that nation. So who am I? You have this identity crisis, and that's the first stage of understanding anything spiritually, to have this healthy identity crisis of who am I, what's my purpose, and where do I go, where do I belong to, what do I belong to, why do I belong to that, and what's my eternal relationship with something or someone, or is there any relationship? So, it's Prabhupada wrote Bhagavad Gita, and even this purport is literally saying how we should really introspect, and when we understand that we're not this body, we can be transferred to a spiritual plane on which we can understand things with much sober consciousness. And so in this part of Bhagavad Gita, which is chapter 2, very early on in Bhagavad Gita, and the title is Contents of Gita Summarized. So Krishna gives a whole summary of Bhagavad Gita in like first few verses, which he starts talking to Krishna. So this is like Krishna started talking to Arjuna just around 13 or 14 verses back. So it's very early in the conversation of Krishna speaking to Arjuna, and he's going like straight in, like, you're not this body, and you're lamenting for what is temporary. And then he talks about how Arjuna was very, he was lamenting, he was in a state of depression, and he didn't want to kill his teachers, his family, his sons, grandsons, his uncles. And this one particular person whose name is Bhishma Dev, who is his great-great-great-grandfather, or he comes in a lineage, or he treats him as a grandfather. And because Bhishma Dev was one of the personalities that really took care of the family of Pandavas after the disappearance of Pandava, the father of Arjuna. So there are 5 brothers, and they were raised by one single mom. And Bhishma Dev was one supporting pillar in this upbringing of these 5 brothers. So Arjuna has very natural affection, and Krishna understands that it's natural to have affection for one's family. But Prabhupada quotes this in I think it's Science of Self-Realization, how it's, or maybe in an introduction of Srimad Bhagavatam, where he says it's speculative grief. And Prabhupada then explains how speculative grief is grieving for something which is not temporary, knowing that this belongs to me, or identifying yourself with something that's temporary, except something that's bodily, as Prabhupada puts. So with that speculative grief, Krishna is literally telling him, you're lamenting for what is not worthy of grief. You're speaking like a wise man, but you're mourning for what is not worthy of grief. So, and then he describes how even if Bhishma dies in this battlefield, he will attain the heavenly kingdoms, because he's died on the righteous battle, on the righteous war, and that's the destination. And even if there is nothing beyond this body, if there is nothing beyond this life, then why are you lamenting for something that's just there, you know? It's like, if everything's just gonna crumble back into like a ball, then what's the point of you lamenting so much? Why are you grieving so much? So, yeah, Krishna is just breaking all the arguments down, and he deconstructs Arjuna's emotions in a confused state. And he just highlights that the eternal truth, the body's perishable, the soul's permanent, and duty transcends grief. So your duty as a Kshatriya, as a warrior, is to fight. And if you give up fighting, then what are you going to do? And then Arjuna's like, oh, I'm going to go to the forest and become a sage. And he's like, well, that's not your nature. So you have to do something that's in your nature. And Krishna, one of the acharyas in our parampara, he described how Krishna's strategy is, Krishna's emphasizing on naiti, a Sanskrit word which describes how negation of all the identifications to reveal the spiritual reality. And this underlines the most foremost dharma that anyone has, is to work according to Krishna's will. Today in the morning, Prabhupada was giving class, and he says how we should work according to Krishna's will. And then he says how Krishna's will is to surrender unto him, which Krishna says in the end of Bhagavad Gita. And then that's actually dharma, that's actually one's duty, to surrender unto Krishna and to serve according to his desires and his will. So, and Krishna is directly telling Arjuna, you have to fight and you have to kill all these people. So if Arjuna deviates from that, that just means that he's not following what his eternal duty is, which is even beyond protecting his own family or his own kingdom or his own brothers, wives. And so Arjuna is going through this crisis. Krishna is deconstructing his arguments, telling him they're just temporary bodies, and you have to accept a new one, and it's going to become useless, and it's old. You see it like an old person. It's like everyone goes through that phase. Everyone's going to have to go through that phase, and like as a 22-year-old, it's like you see someone old, and you're like, oh, I would never be that. But then it's just time separates. You're going to be that soon. So yeah, it's just a matter of time. Krishna's time. So yeah. Prabhupada in the purport, he describes how he actually goes through all the different phases of lamentation and describes why Arjuna is lamenting and why he shouldn't lament. So, yeah, I'll just go back to the soul or the verse. Just like we are changing bodies from one to another, the super soul accompanies us. That's what Prabhupada says. There's two birds that sit on the branch of a tree, and Krishna is one bird, and we are another bird. Krishna is a super soul, Paramatma, Parameshwara, who accompanies us through all the bodies that we take. He accounts. Jai Shri Shri Radha Gokulananda Sitaram Lakshmana Gauranitai. And he accounts for all of our activities, good or bad. And he also accounts for our spiritual activities that we take, our spiritual steps that we take to come closer to him. And everyone accepts a different body according to one's karma. One's karma is like a bank account. If you have good, then you have a good body, a healthy body, and there's how in the scriptures Prabhupada describes how there's signs how someone has a pious karma. It's like they have born in a good family, they have access to facilities of education, health, cleanliness, they have a good financial state, they have good beauty, and they have intelligence, and maybe something else I might have missed out. So, and then if someone has bad karma, then you have a body. There is 8.4 million species to choose from. So depending on your budget, that's what you get. It's like going to a store, and if you want to buy a jacket, you can't buy something less like £500 when you only have like £5, you know. So it depends on your budget, and even though you might desire this body, but you're not going to get it because you don't have the karma yet. So there's 8.4 million bodies to choose from. And Krishna is accompanying us through each and every one of them as the witnessing bird, as Prabhupada says. And he describes how actually we are friends. The super soul and us, Krishna and us, we are actually very, very good, intimate friends. But we have forgotten our relationship with him. And one bird is turned away from the other bird. And Krishna, the other bird which we have turned away from, he's just simply waiting for us to turn around. And Prabhupada describes how if we just follow the instructions of Krishna, then we will get out of this morose state. How he quotes this one verse from Svetavatara Upanishad, which describes how we, as the eating bird, we are fully engrossed with anxiety and moroseness as the enjoyers of the fruits of the tree. But because we don't realize that we are in anxiety and moroseness, because we think this flickering happiness that's it. You know, there is something that's a permanent state of happiness, which we are actually meant to experience as spirit souls, because that's our nature, eternal spiritual beings. And temporary happiness in the material world will never satisfy our thirst for pleasure, happiness in this material world. We might get in a little flickering doses, but it's never permanent. And if we have a little bit of happiness, it always has like 10 times more grief, lamentation, anxiety, moroseness accompanied. So, yeah, as a eating bird, we forget our eternal relationship, and that's why we try to find flickering happiness and we suffer. Or we suffer our bad karma and suffer our good karma as well. And Prabhupada, he gave a class on this verse, and he just started the class with saying, let me just quote. Yeah, Prabhupada describes how, this body is like a dress, and this is not our real identification. We are thinking, I'm Indian, I'm American, I'm African, I'm a Russian, I'm a Brahmana, I'm a Kshatriya, I'm a Shudra, I'm this, I'm that. And he's like, all this is nonsense. And this is a nonsense idea in the world. It's just going on, and this is not real knowledge. And a few verses back, in one of the purports, Prabhupada describes how real knowledge is to understand that we are not this body, but a spirit soul. And Prabhupada describes in the lecture how the leaders of the society are blind, and they don't understand that we are the spirit soul, and they're leading everyone else to believe that they're also not the spirit soul. They're this mature body, they belong to this nation, and this person belongs to that nation, and then they're always fighting. So Prabhupada describes how he describes how advancement of civilization means advancement of fighting. So one nation is thinking, oh, I belong to this nation, and this is me, and this is it. Everyone else is a enemy, and we have to destroy them, and we have to overtake the land, the resources, and everything else. So this very simple idea that we're not this body but the spirit soul, it's enough to significantly reduce the amount of violence that's going on around the world. The simple fact that we're not this body, we're eternal spirit souls, we're all sons and daughters of the Supreme Lord, and we're all equal. The simple fact is enough to establish spiritual communism as Prabhupada describes. And when we understand this, that Krishna is our protector, proprietor, and provider, we become satisfied and become happy. So Prabhupada describes how this modern civilization is making advancement in just identifying with the mature body. But because of this, there's not just human violence, but violence to many other living beings, bodies on this mature world, or on this planet, slaughtering, so many other killings are going on the simple fact of this body. And we have to try to satisfy this body with whatever means, and we can kill whatever animal or even humans to satisfy our desires, for our subtle desires or gross desires to eat something good, to wear something good, to live in a nice place. So, and Krishna is there witnessing all these activities of ours throughout. And we went to Liverpool last week, and we went to this town called Chester, and it was really cold. Like, I was wearing a hoodie and a hat, and I was like freezing, and there was people who were just wearing like barely anything. And I was just talking to this one devotee, and I was like, do these people not feel any cold or anything? And he's like, they do feel it, but because they're so engrossed in this bodily conception that the senses, not the senses, but the intelligence has become so dull that they can't discriminate between what to do. And it's like, that's a very animalistic like mindset, you know? Like a pig. He can smell like this is like poo, but it will still eat it. Because that's the intelligence is so conditioned in that state where you have no other conception of no higher intelligence. But this human form of life, we have this ability to discriminate. And if we don't use it properly, then we'll just go back into the repeated cycle of birth and death, accepting new garments and giving up the old and useless ones. So, yeah, and that's what Prabhupada is trying to say, how blind followers are following blind leaders, and it just continues on and on and on. So there's this need of spiritual knowledge, something that's an actual fact. And it describes how the Vedas are actual fact, because you can experiment it, it's a practical science, and you can realize it for yourself. And in one of the classes, Prabhupada describes how if you want to really understand the spiritual knowledge, you have to approach a spiritual person, because those are realizations. They can guide you correctly on your path to understand yourself. So Prabhupada also describes in this class, in this verse, how without understanding this basic concept of that we are not this body but the soul, we indulge in so much sense gratification that we think we're just so jolly and happy. We try to make so much money. We try to build big buildings, try to own so much land, try to control so many people, businesses. But then there's a question of like, can you stop disease? Can you stop aging? Can you stop death? So these are actual facts, that everyone grows old, everyone gets disease, and everyone dies. But with all your wealth, you can't do anything with it. When you grow old, you grow old. No matter how many surgeries or medications you take, you're growing old. You're growing old, and you can't stop it. And how Prabhupada describes how if one has taken birth, then they're surely to die. And if one accepts a body, then they're surely to give it up. And then there's another body that's waiting for us, material or spiritual. That's when we can really introspect and understand that there is something beyond this temporary material body. And in the human form of life, it's the best opportunity for us to really introspect, really ask the deeper questions of life. In what way we're going, why are we doing this, why are we doing that? And when you understand these basic concepts, then you could focus on something that's permanent. And Prabhupada writes how we are captivated. He uses this word captivated by, I can't find it, but he uses this word captivated by sense enjoyment or something. And then I heard in one class by a devotee how if we want to be truly or devoted to this spiritual life, we also have to get captivated by the process. Because we have to as spirit souls, we are prone to be in one of the other states. We are in the spiritual potency or the mature potency, energy of Krishna. So we have to be captivated by one of them. And if we are captivated by the spiritual energy, then Krishna describes how in Bhagavad Gita, those who are under my internal potency, I give them protection and I maintain them. So we have to build this faith in Krishna that He will look after us. And it's not easy, but we have to try, and Krishna will make up the rest. Because Prabhupada describes how we're very good friends, the spirit soul and the supreme soul, the two birds, but we have forgotten our relationship with Krishna. So when we understand Krishna as our best friend, as our ever well-wisher, as someone who's genuinely looking after us, he's genuinely going to help us into being truly happy, then we can build faith. One devotee told me once how faith comes from knowing that faith comes from experiencing affection from Krishna and his devotees. So when we experience this affection and love from Krishna through the devotees, we develop that faith more and more and more. And with increased faith, we can try to surrender more and more in service of Krishna, which will make us happy. And also this verse talks about how like 1 or 2 verses back, Krishna talks about how I'm an individual, you're an individual. All these personalities on the battlefield are individuals. And after this war, when we die, when we leave this world, we will continue to be individuals. So this whole concept of impersonalism just doesn't work, because impersonalism is just born from disappointment and dissatisfaction, insecurities in our material relationships, and we try to impose that on spiritual plane. And we think, because my relationship in this material world are not satisfied, because I'm so insecure in my own relationship, it's better for me to merge into something that's nothingness, or in some energy or some light. But that's also Krishna's mercy and love towards us, that he allows us to merge into something, because Krishna is like our best friend. He's always desiring good for us and for us to be happy. And if we think that, I'm going to become happy by merging in, then Krishna is like, okay, you try out, and then ultimately we'll come back to this mature world and to accepting new garments, giving up the old ones. And that's why, as individuals, spiritual life is individual. It's a complete individualism. It's a reciprocative relationship between the devotees and Krishna. And if you stick to it, it works. I mean, who am I to say that? I'm just here for I have just been here for a couple of years, but a few devotees have told me who have been around for decades, and they're like, if you just stick to it, you'll experience the higher taste, and then you'll be captivated by Krishna. And that captivated state, you'll be blissful, and you'll identify yourself as a spirit soul that belongs to Krishna, and you'll be in your own nature, which is Satchitananda, eternal, full of happiness, full of bliss and knowledge. So it's just to be 6:50. So I will end it here, unless someone has any questions or anything they want to share or anything. Yes. When I shaved my head, a devotee told me, Mataji asked, how can we get out of the bodily concept of life? And I'm not out of the bodily concept of life, but when I shaved my head for the first time, one devotee told me, shaving your head means that you are about the bodily conception of life. That was very nice, because as soon as you start to identify yourself with the things of the body or the relationships, you think this is me. But then actually one way to identify that you're not this body is to actually study books of Prabhupada and to understand the philosophy and practice what's in the books. That's what Prabhupada said. You chant Hare Krishna and you'll understand. Prabhupada said, when I chant, someone asked Prabhupada, what do you feel like when you chant Hare Krishna? And he's like, I feel fearless. And it's because Prabhupada is on that state of being he knows that he's a spirit soul. So, just practicing the processes which are given by Prabhupada. I mean, you probably know better than me. Anyway, so. Yeah. You have any question? Mm-hmm.
The resources of Krishna for enjoyment, so sense gratification, and I try to keep track of what's going on globally. I'm not so much into news because it's so dark, and so I try to stay away from that, the mainstream. But we can see that nature is doing something. It's like we're not doing it for her, so she's doing something now. But we should pay attention to what's going on now, especially in 2025. There is an awakening of consciousness. So it may not be so bad in the long run. I think we're onto a shift, so kind of a reset. We don't discuss this too much at every here, but it's a point that is worth considering. And when you observe what's going on, because there are clear signs that something needs to be done. We have United Nations, and they're not doing much at the moment. You know, the wars are still going on, atrocities, even genocide is still going on, ethnic cleansing is going on on a daily basis. We're not doing anything. And they're killing the people, killing the animals. So I think nature, in time, she will do what is right.
In this class which Prabhupada gives on this verse, he describes that how all this sense enjoyment, sense gratification, exploitation is going on, and to get beyond it we have to do yajna. And then he describes how there is yajnas of performing fire sacrifice, which were done in the olden days, because they were qualified paraphernalia, personalities who could actually do it. Then Prabhupada says how that's not possible in this age. So what we have to do is we have to do Sankirtan Yajna. So, I mean, when you do Sankirtan Yajna, I mean, olden days, Yajnas were done to rejuvenate nature. Basically, when you do Yajnas, there is rains, and when there's rains, there is growth of vegetation, and then with vegetation growth, and there's a whole cycle of that. The nature is sustained, the society is sustained, everyone lives from it, nobody exploits it, everyone takes their own share. In the Ishopanishad it describes Ishavasya principle, and that's how people lived. But because now it's not being done because of, there's no yajnas happening, because you can't do it, there's no right persons to do it, no right paraphernalia. But there is only one yajna you could do in this Sankirtan Yajna. And that's just simple. You just chant and you dance and you feast. That's about it. So, yes, that does help, because by sound, Prabhupada writes in so many books, so many purports, and even so many devotees have said it, like, just by chanting Hare Krishna, the whole atmosphere becomes purified. And not just here, not in just one place where you stay, but everywhere around you, the cities and the towns where you stay, you become purified. It becomes purified and you also become purified. So it's a simple process. So yeah, if there's no questions, and there's 4 more minutes to go Arati. So, okay, I'll call it there. Okay. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaura Bhaktivedanta ki jai. So there'll be Gaurati. Curtains will open in 3-4 minutes. So. And there will be Prasadam served after in the reception at 7:20. So please stay. Hare Krishna. Thank you for attending. And apologies if I said anything wrong. It's always correct. Hare Krishna. Thank you.